Hello there my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars video. Ever since he became the co-president of Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni's been very quiet. Aside from one comment on StarWars.com when Kathleen Kennedy stepped down, there's been basically nothing in the way of a big interview, talking about the future of Lucasfilm, the relationship it's going to have with Disney, Josh D'Amaro, the upcoming slate of content even. It's been radio silence until today, because the cowboy hat-wielding co-creator of the Mandoverse has finally decided to open up, and he's talking about the Mandalorian and Grogu, which is now just under 3 months away. So this is a breaking story from Empire magazine. The full issue drops on March 12th, and Dave Filoni explains why this movie is different, why he perceives it as a fresh new start, but he also debunks a few rumors going round, so let's dive straight in. The Mandalorian and Grogu relaunches the galaxy, and the quotes they've gone with: "We're in a completely different era of Star Wars." Now this is the headline. This has been making the rounds, and the reaction from fans has been rather interesting. Many fans are accusing Dave of being somewhat out of touch, but only with one specific comment we'll come onto in just a moment. But they say this: "It's been a whopping 7 years since Star Wars was last on the big screen. 2019's The Rise of Skywalker marked the end of an era, the end of the Skywalker saga, and the end of the sequel trilogy. And ever since, Star Wars stories have unfolded on the small screen, unspooling the adventures of Ahsoka Tano, Boba Fett, Cassian Andor, and others. But no characters have exploded onto streaming quite the same way as the Mandalorian and Grogu, whose adventures across the galaxy charmed diehards and newcomers alike. Baby Yoda, as fans first dubbed him, was inescapable, and now the pair are charged to bringing Star Wars back to cinemas. The Mandalorian and Grogu is coming." Okay, so now this is where Dave Filoni comes in. This is the juicy stuff, and he begins by comparing Mando to The Force Awakens, which a decade ago similarly brought Star Wars back to the big screen, although arguably that was far bigger. But Dave says this: "Episode 7 was a completely different entity. I had dreams of Episode 7 since I came out of Return of the Jedi. We came out of the cinema, and we were like, after Episode 6 must come 7. So where is 7? We're in a completely different era of Star Wars." So he's emphasizing that the days of Star Wars being a sequential saga are done. I also think he's saying this stuff for the benefit of casual audiences, those who didn't watch the TV shows. He might be saying this stuff to reacquaint fans, ones who maybe haven't been keeping up with the shows, haven't checked into Star Wars in a hot minute, and maybe haven't seen anything since The Rise of Skywalker. And he sets the tone, gives them context. This is post-Episode 6, but long before Episode 7. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I wonder if on some level, the Mandoverse generally is kind of like his vision for what Episode 7 should have been like, even though he's a fan of what Disney did. And while you might say, well, it's Jon Favreau's movie, Dave Filoni did co-write it, and this article reveals he's the second unit director, so he does still have a major say, not to mention he's co-president and CCO. But I think he's saying this is a different kind of sequel. It's different in terms of its themes, its characters, and they say, quote, "The Mandalorian and Grogu doesn't carry the burden of introducing a new trilogy. Instead, Filoni says it's a big celebration of these two characters, Din Djarin and his apprentice Grogu." And this brings us on to Dave debunking a massive rumor. The Mandalorian and Grogu is not going to be part of a trilogy. Now, just a pinch of salt here, I don't think they're necessarily ruling it out. The Mandalorian and Grogu might be slated as a standalone for now, but if it ends up being an enormous success, of course there is going to be a sequel, and they're going to continue the Mandoverse on the big screen. Jon Favreau said much of the same at Celebration. He couldn't answer for certain if there was going to be a season 4, but if the movie does well, that's going to do wonders for the TV show on Disney+, people discovering it for the first time, people going back to rewatch it, maybe catch up if they haven't seen all 3 seasons, and I also think it'll be good for the hype for Ahsoka Season 2. But going back to Dave's Episode 7 comments, part of the reason there's been some backlash is because he sounds a bit out of touch, and I want to be careful here, because Dave has a certain way of talking. On paper, you never get a good sense of the tone he used, and his comments are generally pretty vague. You have to read between the lines, and some fans, from what I've seen from the response, seem to think he's making a connection between the hype for Episode 7 and the hype for The Mandalorian and Grogu. And this all goes back to the Super Bowl fiasco a few weeks ago. Lucasfilm is acting as though they still have the same audience that they once did, that nothing has changed, that there have been no controversies, and that they might think this is a guaranteed win. And so I guess what people are saying is that, with this comment, he thinks the hype levels are the same. I personally think it's a bit of a stretch to make this interpretation. I don't think it's an endorsement, as per se, of The Force Awakens, as just telling us that the future of Star Wars is different to what it was in the past. That's the only way I read this. But let's say he did mean that. Let's say he's talking about the hype. In that case, he'd be wrong. As much as I'm looking forward to the film, and by the reaction I've seen online, I think I'm more excited than most, the hype and conversations about this movie are nowhere near on the level of pre-Force Awakens. Nothing in recent years has come close. I hate to say it, but The Mandalorian and Grogu is tiny by comparison. And I have said this before, and I still maintain, it could be a secret hit. It might do incredible numbers with families, especially those with kids, but at the moment, and how fans feel about it in like the diehard spaces, its relevance is rather tiny by comparison. The way Star Wars felt like it was truly back before walking into that theatre in 2015 was a cultural phenomenon. Everyone was talking about it, everyone was hyped, and even after seeing it, there was some criticism, not as much as there was for Episode 8, but in the context of that specific film, fans generally liked the new characters, they saw a lot of potential, Luke was back at the end of the movie, so fans expected Lucasfilm to do more with him in the next installment, and there was so much discourse. Star Wars YouTube was popping off, theories were taking place. It was amazing, Star Wars felt genuinely relevant again. But the gist of what Dave is trying to say, and as aforementioned, likely for the benefit of those who've not seen the TV show, this is a very different type of Star Wars. But Dave wasn't the only person to speak to Empire magazine. We also have comments from Din Djarin himself, Pedro Pascal, who says, quote, "Season 3 only felt like the ending of a particular chapter. With Mando now working with the New Republic, they open up the opportunity for him to continue his best work as a bounty hunter, but this time only working for the good guys." And Pedro says, "This combines skill and morality. But through his relationship with Grogu, there is an expansion of his heart, and a disarming of armor, so to speak, that leads him to fight for what he knows is right." And it's interesting because, like I said with Dave Filoni's comments, what Pedro is saying reflects similar sentiments expressed by Jon Favreau. Mando's values have changed, and they're really trying to move away from Season 3. But I do think it's for the best, being able to see Pedro's face, Din Djarin's face, and a more human aspect to him. You're seeing him as a person, you're dealing with him as a human being, not just a hardened bounty hunter. And that's why the 2 or 3 times Din has shown his face in the past have been some of the character's best moments. And look, he's not doing this by choice. In the movie, it's the Hutts who remove his helmet. But I think it's going to lead to something other than another redemption. I think this time it's going to lead to character growth, instead of a regression brought about by Mando orthodoxy. That would be the wrong way to go about it. And then finally, my friends, we're back to Dave, who says this: "The main question with the movie is, will the audience believe it? Are they going to feel it? That comes through characters. If the characters are connecting, then the adventure plays, the action plays, and the tension plays. The next adventure begins." So the full issue of Empire magazine, which I'm sure will give us some more juicy tidbits, is out next week. But for now, those are some new comments by Dave and Pedro. What do you guys think? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree? Is The Mandalorian and Grogu going to capture our hearts? There is a good chance they break our hearts. But share your thoughts down below, guys. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new. Check me out on socials. And may the Force be with you always.